Hey, toy and pop culture fans. Welcome back to the Spectre Creative channel. If this is your first time here, I definitely encourage you to check out the channel, and we have quite a lot of videos that you might like. But if you've clicked on this video today, you might like mini-comics. You might like He-Man mini-comics. I'm Scott ToyGuru Neitlich. I was the brand manager of Masters of the Universe Classics and the writer of the mini-comics, all 8 of them, story writer for the first 3. And I want to talk today about what our goals were for these mini-comics. It wasn't just simply to tell stories or to use our non-media to promote the line. I mean, I guess you could say that was the long-term goal, was we wanted to sell as many toys as possible. And if we could use the mini-comics to help sell toys, that was, I suppose, the #1 goal. But there were other things we were trying to do with them. And some of them are more complicated than others. Some of them straightforward, some not so much. So let's jump in. So a big one was we wanted to leave the He-Man world better than we found it, if you will. We wanted to leave it a more robust world, to use one of the bingo words from my time. Now, I know a lot of fans see Masters of the Universe as kind of one thing, this image, He-Man versus Skeletor, maybe with or without their mounts. And absolutely, this is the core image of what the brand became. It took a while to get to this point. Filmation basically put it in stone, but it wasn't always this. But this is what pop culture sees for the most part as He-Man. And if you like that concept of He-Man battling Skeletor, believe me, awesome, and you should like it. I mean, it's what the brand's all about, right? And there are multiple animated series that basically present literally hundreds of episodes of He-Man battling Skeletor and his minions, and and the Masters on He-Man's side, and Randor and Sorceress and Evelyn and Beastman and Flog and Butthead, if you're going to be talking about new adventures and all of that. And there's even a 1987 live-action movie that basically told the same thing. He-Man versus Skeletor. Granted, some of it was on Earth hanging out with cows and Courtney Cox, but that's not important right now. The point is, it was still that core story. He-Man versus Skeletor. Dolph Lundgren versus Frank Langella, right? Well, okay, that was just the actors that played them. So, a big thing we were trying to do with the mini-comics, and I think we honestly really succeeded, as I mentioned about leaving the brand in better shape than we found it, was the idea of moving a brand forward. Superman versus Lex Luthor, Spider-Man versus Doc Ock. It's like, how many times can you tell the same story without any character development or any feeling of momentum for the story and the brand? Now, a part of this was definitely influenced by sales of the Classics line. By 2013-ish, we were, more or less, we were running out of characters, to be blunt. We were running out of especially vintage released characters, which sold the best. So what if we could use the mini-comics to try to correct this from a marketing standpoint and a sales standpoint? The other big thing we really wanted to do, at least kind of we tends to be me a lot, but there was a team, so I'm going to use we, was use the mini-comics and the bios to continue the story of 2000X. I loved the 2000X series. I thought it was one of the greatest animated series ever. And it was definitely heartbreaking that it ended before, its time. This comic was the last episode, basically done as a comic book. Now, Ian Richter, who I was able to meet with before he left Mattel, both gave me his notes, and basically most of his notes were up on an interview on He-Man.org. You can easily find it with a Google search. And in these notes, he talked about what was going to happen in future seasons. Specifically, the Masters were going to become renegades in their own land and live in these caves where they were going to have to battle Hordak after he returned. Basically, making the Masters, it was renegades in their own land. That's why they were called the Renegade Masters of the Universe. And, the Skeletor was going to become king and yada, yada, yada. So the mini-comics very specifically followed this blueprint, including King Randor's work on organizing a council of Eternia amongst all the tribes, as well as rescuing his father from Despondos. This panel in particular from Minicomic 3 paid off that plot thread that was started in the 2000X series, where Randor starts gathering the council together. Another big thing we wanted to do with the mini-comics was kind of connect the dots, or connect large segments of He-Man continuity together, and within the framework of the 2000X show how other iterations could just continue 2000X. So that was why the first set of mini-comics, Minicomic 3, ended with He-Man and She-Ra going off on some new adventures. I love the little pun He-Man says, in the mood for some new adventures. And this was, literally the new adventure spaceship drops down and recruits them off, and it was a great way of showing how 2000X could segue into the new adventure storyline and make that all-inclusive within that universe. So this was very deliberate, especially within the idea that retail lines have to be refreshed every year with new characters, new packaging, much like year 2 of 2000X was the Snake Men. All right, so another thing with the mini-comics was being, I guess, what you could call all-inclusive. The idea that we wanted to use the mini-comics to feature characters that we might not be able to get to in the action figures. Of course, we wanted to. It wasn't like, being in the mini-comics meant you weren't getting a figure, but at least the characters would appear somewhere if they didn't get a figure. So, for example, the face-off of the creative figure contest, the vintage contest, and the 30th anniversary contest, we very deliberately put that into the mini-comics because, it would have been great to get all these figures, but if we couldn't, we knew at least they showed up somewhere in the line, be it the mini-comics. It was also a way to highlight kind of obscure characters from the vintage era, like Tug-O-War here, a character who shows up in one mini-comic in the vintage era, helping the Masters win literally a tug-of-war match. And so from that turned him into a sort of cosmic being that shows up to, the scales must be tipped, and he shows up. Another great example of this is Sky High, another character I think the fans kind of named. He was on a cross-sell poster, a painting, piloting the was it the Wind Raider? Yeah, I think it was the Wind Raider he was piloting. And yeah, like you just saw his head, so, throw him in there. As well as all the characters from unused style guides and concepts, such as Dare, Son of He-Man. There were multiple Dare, Son of He-Man concepts created in the 80s, and one of the ones that wound up on the internet in the early 90s featured Forklift and Airbag and Kayla and Manny Faces 2, Ram Man 2, and the mini-comics were a great way to, again, include them. It would have been wonderful to do figures of all of them. That was always the long-term goal. And likewise, the flip side is doing the bad guys, the Evil Warrior version of that from the Hero Son of He-Man mini-comic, where, again, you're getting new iterations of older characters as well as brand new characters like Slobber and Mistletoe, Sawtooth, etc., which actually had to be designed by Axel because he was mentioned but not seen. All right, and then there's the idea of introducing a new idea. So, of course, we were using the mini-comics to connect things and feature characters that had shown up in like one panel or one unused, pitch book or style guide, that kind of thing. That was easy money. But the idea of creating brand new characters that you've never seen before, well, obviously we knew not every character that we put in the mini-comics was going to be, if you will, fan-demanded to make a figure of. But if some of them wound up being requested, then our goal was met. Because, as I said, we were running out of figures to make. So if we could create new characters in the mini-comics, and if just a handful of them were requested by fans to make as a figure, like Lady Slither here, one of the characters that was, very much requested. And she was dropped into the mini-comics specifically for that reason. I also thought it'd be great to have a female snake man or snake woman, as well as to show what the snake men, or snake people were doing on other planets besides Eternia. She was kind of King Hiss's counterpart on a different planet. Each snake person had their own little, fiefdom. And then, of course, expanding the Masters from Preternia. You had a few characters that were established, like King Grayskull and Hero, Titus, bringing in characters like Moss Man, showing that he was still there, and Green Goddess, and then brand new characters like Sir Laserlot and Mighty Spectre, putting Vina there from 2000X. It wasn't just characters, though. And Gladiator, too, from the previous one. That was an all-new character. We also wanted to, flesh the world out with new playsets. So, we felt the Snake Men needed a playset. They never got a playset. So Axel very specifically designed this. I mean, we talked back and forth a lot about the design. It was actually based on a vintage, unproduced playset, but you can see it, it looks like a vintage playset. It was done very deliberately to look like a playset. The same with the all-energy Castle Grayskull from the final mini-comic. This was done to ideally, again, if fans demanded it after they saw it, to do an all-clear blue energy version of Castle Grayskull using the existing tool that we paid for, the very expensive tool that we paid for Classics. So if we could get another deco of the castle out, yay. All right. And then, in addition to new ideas, there was the idea of boldly going where no He-Man story had gone before. So this was kind of the final stretch. In addition to, introducing established characters and dropping in a couple one-offs like Gladiator and Lady Slither, the idea was, and this was part of moving the brand forward, to leave the He-Man versus Skeletor timeline behind and see what happens in the future. This was done, it was kind of like a breadcrumb of trails throughout the mini-comics. The first big breadcrumb was this panel from Mini-Comic 2, where you see a ghosted image of King He-Man, talking to his agent Mighty Spectre. And I know, Mighty Spectre, we'll get into that later. But really, the whole reason was not necessarily to feature Spectre, but to really feature King He-Man, and this was the first, piece of the puzzle. And then as we would go, we were building up to when He-Man was going to become King He-Man. That image you saw earlier, it was going to pay off. So you would see eventually, his son would get introduced when He-Man returned from New Adventures. You learn that he and Teela were actually secretly married before he left, as kind of like a romantic thing. And this brings us kind of to the Batman Beyond era of Masters of the Universe. It was actually very deliberately kind of crafted after this concept of what happens, when He-Man gets older and Skeletor gets older and their kids take over the series. In fact, my favorite comic book, Savage Dragon, does this very well. And Malcolm Dragon, who is Savage Dragon's son, is now the lead of the comic and has been for, almost like 5-7 years at this point. So that inspired it as well, I will definitely say. And the idea of sort of real time and the idea of the next generation coming in that both Batman Beyond and Savage Dragon does. And it wasn't just going to be, the sons of the characters or, the offspring. We were also going to meet their mentors. So on He-Man's side, of course, you have King He-Man mentoring his son Dare. And then on the Skeleteen side, Skeletor's son, you were going to have an older Evil Lyn mentoring him, as well as seeing, kind of all, sort of the team that Skeleteen is part of, with the Unnamed One and an older Jitsu, and now Demo Man is like an actual character that's fighting, not just, part of Skeletor. Multibot has become, the Ultra Beast, etc., etc. So that was a great way to look into the future. But, hey, why just look into the future when you can look into the past? Okay, that was terrible. But yes, we also wanted to explore the past of Eternia. And not just, King Grayskull's time, but what happened right before the 2000X series. Like when King Randor and Prince Keldor, or Prince Randor and Prince Keldor were fighting side by side in the Great Wars against Count Marzo. There was kind of like the Anakin Obi-Wan Clone Wars version before Skeletor, before Anakin became evil. And then furthermore, exploring the origin of Skeletor and how Keldor, turned to the dark side. Kind of, your Revenge of the Sith, if you will, for Masters of the Universe. And even introducing a new character, introducing the Spirit of Hordak figure, which was very deliberately done in the mini-comic, knowing that we had this figure on the way. And the fact that the figure never leaked and showed up as a surprise is still, I think, one of my greatest achievements as a brand manager. I don't know how that happened, but it did, and it paid off. So, dropping him in the mini-comic, fans start asking for him, and lo and behold, we did him as a figure. How cool is that? It's like hand in glove. And then, of course, Hero and, training Dare, so, Hero and Hero, finding, new looks for both of them and paying homage to both looks for Dare from both of the 1980s style guides. There were two completely different ones that were Dare, Son of He-Man, so we sort of merged both of them together. One of them became New Adventures, basically. All right, and now the final thing is, and this is getting to the end of the video here, I get it. I'm a toy nerd too. We fear change. We like we like our brands the way they are. And that was exactly why we had this final battle in the last mini-comic where He-Man, She-Ra, Hero, and King Grayskull in their prime are sort of ripped through time with a magic spell to help defend Eternia. So even though King He-Man there and She-Ra at arms, She-Ra becomes the new Man-at-Arms, are both on the battlefield, they're prime versions of these characters, and the same with the bad guys in the counterspell. So you have Horde Prime and Hordak and King Hiss and Skeletor. I mean, King Hiss is dead, so, and et cetera, et cetera. And so it's Hordak at this point, but they're ripped through time and they're brought back to face off against the characters in their prime on the good side, because basically, while I know, and myself included, we sort of fear change. We want the brand to be about He-Man versus Skeletor. So this was kind of meant to be like a last hurrah. We could get the core versions of the character together one last time to battle it out in an awesome, pin-up, one-page spread where you were going to get to, for one last time, see He-Man versus Skeletor, She-Ra versus Horde Prime, Hero taking out, Hordak, and not King Grayskull, and Hero with King Hiss there. So, it's good versus evil, one last hurrah. Let's do this before the brand moves forward. So that last panel, the last mini-comic, was very deliberate because it was pushing the brand forward. It was saying, this is the future. It's the son of He-Man versus the son of Skeletor with the energy Castle Grayskull. You've got good guy advisors, you've got bad guy advisors, you've got good guy allies, bad guy allies, and this was meant to be a poster for what was to come if the brand could continue. I think it's a pretty cool poster. I'd like to see these stories, but alas, never happened. So that's it. We just had that one little panel to show what was to come. Maybe someone will pick up the reins where it was left off, and we'll see more. I'd appreciate a subscription and a like. It helps tell YouTube these are cool videos to share with others, and you'll be helping other He-Man fans by doing that. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.